If you're like me, you'd remember how good we had it back in our childhoods when it came to mobile games, before there were invasive predatory microtransactions, hyper-casual games, and Genshin Impact. We had masterpieces such as Angry Birds, Cut the Rope, and Jetpack Joyride. Simple, fun games that you could play on the go. Sure, I might be a bit blindsided by nostalgia, but these games had a much greater focus on being enjoyable to play compared to the absolute hellhole of Candy Crush clones, anime gambling for children, and absolutely horrendous fake ads we have now. With all this doom and gloom, I want to instead talk about a series that stood up above the rest of the classic mobile games, and what happened to this masterpiece of a game more than a decade later. The earliest memories I have of Plants vs. Zombies was during a trip to China to visit my relatives. I was very young at the time, probably only around 8 years old, but I vividly remember one of my cousins showing me a charming little game about some little green fellows fighting zombies. I unfortunately didn't know what this game was called at first, considering everything was in Chinese, but nevertheless, I immediately fell in love with the game, and I would find any chance to play the game on my grandparents' PC that was probably still running Windows XP at the time. I eventually had to leave China to go back home, and I eventually found out it was called Plants vs. Zombies. Years passed as I continued to follow the PvZ franchise, and now here we are, 14 years after the release of the first game. So where is the PvZ franchise now? It's pretty easy to say that Plants vs. Zombies is a successful franchise, with the first game being one of the biggest hits in the gaming space. It's surprising how many people know what the letters PvZ mean. If they didn't find out about the series through the first game, they probably found out from the highly anticipated sequel, or from the third-person multiplayer shooters, or the card-based strategy game, or the YouTube phenomenon that is Zack's Got Games somehow posting more than 1,000 episodes of Plants vs. Zombies gameplay, alongside a plethora of other YouTubers playing the PvZ series. What I'm trying to say is that Plants vs. Zombies is really big, with more games than you can count on one hand, and a player base bigger than most in its heyday. Plants vs. Zombies was no doubt one of the greatest video game series out there, or at least that's what I personally believe. But as the 14th anniversary of Plants vs. Zombies passed, this beloved series is showing signs that it is breathing its last breaths. But how do we even get here? There are many things to point towards as being the cause of Plants vs. Zombies' downfall, but I want to take an in-depth look at what exactly happened through the years, so let's go take a trip down memory lane. The first Plants vs. Zombies was the best of the best. The simple formula of planting vegetables to defend against walking corpses somehow created one of the best games known to man. Even today, I still think it holds up in terms of its gameplay, art, and music. Despite its age, the general flow of the game is still fun even to today's standards. It's hard to put down a game once you start playing thanks to the fact that the game makes sure to keep things fresh constantly. You don't get bored of using the same plants over and over again because you literally get a new plant almost every single level. And when there isn't a new plant for you to try, it's because the game straight up turns the mechanics upside down and tells you, here, start bowling with walnuts, go play whack-a-mole with the zombies, we've also shrink rate all of them. On top of this, a conveyor belt level acts as a final challenge to every 10 levels, before it's accompanied by an entire world change where new mechanics, zombies, and plants await. The game also introduces things for the player as a break from the main campaign of the adventure mode in the form of the Zen Garden, the Almanac, minigames, puzzles, and the survival mode. It's surprising how much stuff is packed into this small 14-year-old game. But what I think the best thing about Plants vs. Zombies is that after plowing through 49 levels, you beat stage 5-9. You expect to get another conveyor belt level, but instead you're greeted with Crazy Dave being kidnapped, no music at all, and a completely empty rooftop at night. Which is oddly quite creepy, and there's also the fact that your main opponent is just missing. That is until a big pissed off robot stomps into the roof and suddenly you're fighting the final boss of the game, Dr. Zomboss. After a long-winded battle with some ups, haha, take that stupid robot! And downs, no! You finally defeat Dr. Zomboss, and the plant and zombies settle their differences with an incredible concert performed by none other than Sunflower, and the game ends. This is just such a charming and satisfying ending, and it always brings a smile to my face. And it seems many people agreed with me, because Plants vs. Zombies was a massive success for PopCap. They got acquired by EA in 2011, and a sequel was in the works, which is what we're going to talk about now. Oh, what a segue! The way I would describe Plants vs. Zombies 2 is that it was big, much bigger than the first game. It has a considerably larger selection of plants, with new ones being constantly added to this day, and many more levels for you to play that are now divided into different themed worlds that are loosely supposed to represent time periods. Ancient Egypt, Far Future, Dark Ages, and more. Just like the first game, each world introduces new mechanics, zombies, and plants. Generally, PvZ2 was quite faithful to its predecessor and improved on the existing Plants vs Zombies formula while not drastically changing the gameplay for the worse. For example, one of the biggest additions to the game is a mechanic called plant food. Every once in a while, a zombie with a green glow will appear who will drop plant food when killed. You can then use this on a single plant that will activate an ability. This mechanic is honestly my favorite addition they made to the second game, as every single plant in the game has a unique plant food ability and it adds a layer of complexity not seen in Plants vs Zombies 1. However, even though there is a lot of good to say about Plants vs Zombies 2, there's unfortunately also a lot of bad. While the first game in the series was originally released on PC and imported to pretty much every platform in existence, Plants vs Zombies 2 is strictly a mobile game, which means it has microtransactions. Yay! Now there's a common misconception that the decision to make PvZ2 as a mobile game and to implement microtransactions was forced by EA, due to their infamous status as being that one very greedy company who adds a price tag to literally everything. This has led to the consensus that it was EA buying out PopCap that began the downfall of the series, while in reality it was the core PopCap team that made the decision to go down the mobile game route. Thus why there's the existence of microtransactions in PvZ2. Unfortunately, this left a bit of a sour taste for most fans of the series as it led to many unnecessary things being added that were ultimately a detriment to the game. This includes premium plants that are now under a paywall, gemium plants that can be only purchased with gems, a rare currency that can be bought with money, and an upgrade system that just straight up increases the stats of plants. All these things were made to drive microtransactions and basically makes Plants vs Zombies 2 pay to win. Yes, it's very possible to beat Plants vs Zombies 2 without spending a single cent, but spending money allows you to have access to more plants, some of which are really good, and removes the purposely placed grinding caused by the upgrade system in the first place. Also, the game sometimes feels unnecessarily unfair to tempt you into buying just one good premium plant or paying to upgrade your plants. Unfortunately, microtransactions aren't the only negative thing about PvZ2. There's also some flaws regarding game design. Unlike in PvZ1, PvZ2 doesn't give you a plant or item every single level, instead opting to spread it out across multiple levels. This makes it a bit of a drag to play through the game at times, since it starts to get boring real quick when you need to go through a long stretch of levels. PopCap tried to alleviate this by adding different modifiers and types of levels, which usually range from barely affecting gameplay to forcing an entire different playstyle, such as making certain tiles unusable, having pre-picked plants, or having a limit on how many plants you can place, and a bunch more. Overall, they do provide good variety to the gameplay, but when there's over 300 levels, you can get a bit burned out from doing the same thing repeatedly, and it makes Plants vs Zombies 2 long, boring, and grindy at times. There's also a huge lack of any worthwhile extra content after you beat the main adventure mode. There are no mini games to play like in PvZ1. Instead, it's been replaced with two modes called Penny's Pursuit and Arena. I never played these modes much, but I can tell you they were definitely not as fun as the extra content from the first game. Vase Breaker is also present, but in a much more reduced state, and Vase Breaker was one of my least favorite minigames in the first game anyways. However, I can recognize that because PvZ2 is a live service game, you can go back to the game to experience new things when an update drops, which makes it very replayable. I still think that the first game was more fun though, but there's just one thing I can't forgive PopCap for, and that's we didn't get a music video where the plants and zombies dance away into the night at the end. Truly unacceptable crap game!
Boogie your brains right over here.
Joking aside, I think Plants vs Zombies 2 wasn't absolutely terrible. I personally had fun of it, but it definitely has quite a few flaws, and the microtransactions that were present in Plants vs Zombies 2 foreshadow an unfortunate focus on profit that PopCap was starting to develop. After Plants vs Zombies 2, PopCap decided to pivot away from the main series of tower defense games, and that's how we got Plants vs Zombies Garden Adventures. So it turns out before Plants vs Zombies Garden Warfare was released, a spin-off Facebook game was made called Plants vs Zombies Adventures, which eventually got discontinued a year later after its release. I didn't even know there were Facebook exclusive games, and I've also never played Plants vs Zombies Adventures, so I'm just going to read you its wiki article and move on. Plants vs Zombies Garden Warfare was PopCap's first successful attempt at a major spin-off. No, go away PvZ Adventures. In the tower defense games, you played as a homeowner defending your house with plants, but in this game you play as the plants and zombies. Exciting stuff. Not only that, it's now a third-person shooter, and apparently a really fun one at that. I say apparently because I've never actually played any of them, instead I experienced it vicariously by watching YouTubers play the game, so you're going to have to take everything I say about the Plants vs Zombies Garden Warfare series with a big grain of salt, because my research is mainly comprised of reading wiki articles and watching videos made by Danraid, Valhyperion, and Zaxgut Games. But hey, at least I did do research, unlike some other YouTubers who talk about Plants vs Zombies. In Garden Warfare, the Plants and Zombies have now been given a 3D remake with varying levels of success, and they've been pitted against each other in eternal war where they fight each other to the death. There's a wide variety of game modes from classics such as Team Deathmatch and Kill Confirmed, which are labeled as Team Vanquish and Vanquish Confirmed in Garden Warfare, to more unique game modes such as Gnome Bomb, which is like CSGO or Valorant. Okay, this is a really bad explanation, but apparently it's similar to the Obliteration game mode in Battlefield 4, and let's just move on to the gameplay itself. The Plants and Zombies both have different characters to play on each side that act as different classes. The Plants have the Pea Shooter, Sunflower, Chomper, and Cactus, while the Zombies have the Foot Soldier, Engineer, Scientist, and All-Star. Each character has a different weapon and a set of 3 abilities that they can use that are catered to playing a specific role, such as how Sunflower has the ability to heal other plants and has a faster revive time on teammates, which specializes her to a more supportive/healer class. Now you might think that having just 4 classes on each team is a bit small, but guess what? Each class has a class within it in the form of character variants. All characters in Garden Warfare have 6 or more variants, which can fundamentally change the playstyle of the character. Some variants apply elemental buffs to your weapon, some apply stat changes to your character, while some completely change the main weapon and hence change the way a character is played. This allowed players to have different playstyles while still using their preferred class, and was one of the main reasons why Garden Warfare was so unique, enjoyable, and replayable. Separate from the multiplayer PvP is also a co-op mode called Garden Ops. This game mode is reminiscent of the tower defense games, as it's a wave-based survival mode where you defend a garden against 10 waves of zombies with up to 3 other teammates. Each wave has a chance to be a special wave where special zombie types will spawn in, and at waves 5 and 10, there are boss waves where Dr. Zomba spins a boss roulette to determine which ones you will fight. There are plant pots around gardens where you can place plants to help you defend. You can get these plants from sticker packs which are purchased with coins, and they contain cosmetics, weapon upgrades, and the aforementioned Garden Ops plants and character variants. Overall, Plants vs Zombies Garden Warfare was a surprisingly successful game, despite the very odd direction of shifting from a 2D tower defense game to a 3D third-person shooter. Even the creator of Plants vs Zombies, George Fan, was just completely confused at the concept of this game. If you look at a recent AMA he did, he said that his reaction to Garden Warfare was just basically, huh? But Popcat wasn't going to stop at Plants vs Zombies Garden Warfare, as it was barely at its full potential. That's where Plants vs Zombies Garden Warfare 2 comes in, a sequel fully realizing the Garden Warfare concept and fleshing out features from the first game while also adding new ones. There's a lot of stuff to cover in Garden Warfare 2, and I honestly don't know if I'm going to get it all right, me not having played this game and all, but let's start off with the Backyard Battleground, the successor to the main menu in Garden Warfare 1. Having so much more content, Garden Warfare 2 couldn't condense everything it had to offer within just a menu screen like Garden Warfare 1 did. In its place, the Backyard Battleground is present and is a hub world where the main base of the plants and zombies are on opposite sides separated by a no man's land. In each respective faction's base, you can access multiplayer, a single player campaign that was absent in Garden Warfare 1, the sticker shop, Garden Ops, and the newly added Graveyard Ops, which is Garden Ops where you play as the zombies, a customization booth, a quest board, and a bunch of other stuff, but that's most of the important ones. Now remember how I joked about how the plants and zombies must fight to the death in eternal war? Well, turns out that wasn't a joke, and if you walk outside, you find yourself in an all-out war between the plants and zombies where each side constantly sends soldiers to their inevitable death. You might be tempted to intervene and help your side win, in fact there's even a flag in the middle you can capture and defend, but be wary as this prompts each side to start escalating the war and retaliate with progressively stronger units, eventually leading to full-on bosses brawling it out. Returning from Garden Warfare 1 is all the previous classes, but with 4 additional characters for both teams. The plants got the Citron, Rose, Colonel Corn, and Torchwood, and the zombies got the Imp, Super Brains, Captain Deadbeard, and the Hover Goat 3000. These new classes had variants of their own, and the already existing classes got brand new variants added on top of the ones they had from Garden Warfare 1. Speaking of variants, legendary variants are a new type of variant with a unique mechanic. Get a streak of kills with a legendary variant, and you'll be granted a temporary buff in damage, speed, max ammo size, or damage resistance depending on the variant. However, legendary variants are very rare and the process of earning all of them is long and tedious. Looking at the multiplayer in Garden Warfare 2, it remains largely unchanged from the first game, but that's okay because it was already good enough, and if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Also, the addition of a fully playable single player campaign and a bunch of other content separate from the multiplayer has diversified the number of things you can do, while in Garden Warfare 1, it was basically just the multiplayer and Garden Ops you could play. Garden Warfare 2 was truly an amazing sequel that turned a good concept into a great game. No, I definitely did not steal that from Vile Hyperion because I am a man of integrity. But yeah, the general consensus for Garden Warfare 2 is that it was able to add so much more to the table than Garden Warfare 1 did, and it showed that the Plants vs. Zombies franchise was doing better than ever. Unfortunately, this beloved series would start going downhill from here. It wasn't an immediate nosedive into failure, but from the release of Garden Warfare 2 in 2016 to today, the series hasn't been exactly doing well, with lackluster recent releases and a general downward trend in popularity of this franchise. But what exactly caused it? Clearly it's EA, guys! Boo! I hate Electronic Arts! Okay, I'm kidding, of course. I already talked about how it's a common misconception that it was EA's fault, but I want to go more in depth about this. As easy as it is to dunk on them for ruining the series, they don't develop the games. That's PopCap. But don't get me wrong, EA still sucks for the loot boxes and other scummy practices. But honestly, you can just be upset at PopCap instead, because the original team that made Plants vs. Zombies 1 was no longer present after the first game, with the lead designer and creator, George Fan, only having an advisory role for Plants vs. Zombies 2 before getting laid off eventually. So the people who made one of the best games of all time aren't the same people who made a microtransaction-riddled sequel in order to meet insane sales figures. In fact, George Fan has made it well aware that he does not like microtransactions and was fighting to keep it out of the sequel during his time at PopCap. It's possible that with EA being the publisher, there was an expectation for PvZ 2 to meet a certain amount of profit, but it was ultimately up to PopCap to make the design decisions. So now that we have that out of the way, let's look at what happened after Garden Warfare 2 and identify why the franchise started going downhill. At this point, the Plants vs. Zombies series is actually going extremely well. Garden Warfare 2 was a massive success, and very quickly after its release, another PvZ game was released within the same year called Plants vs. Zombies Heroes. This game continues the trend of having weird genre changes for spin-offs, with PvZ Heroes being a card game. However, this game is actually quite similar to the tower defense games in some ways, since you're basically still defending yourself in a 5-lane system where you place plants or zombies on tiles, except you just get them in the form of cards now, and there's also cards called tricks, which are basically spells in any other card game. From my experience, the game was actually quite fun. It has a good amount of depth and strategy involved. Maybe not as much as something like Yu-Gi-Oh, but you have to take more than 1 second to think about what cards to use instead of slapping down the card with the most health and attack, since cards have a bunch of different abilities and properties that form synergies with other cards. A main feature of this game is heroes, hence the name PvZ Heroes, that have superpowers which are exclusive trick cards, and the hero you choose determines the 2 classes of cards you can play. Each class specializes in some type of playstyle. For example, the Kabloom class is very spammy, focused on attack buffs, and high damage. Plants vs. Zombies Heroes I would say was not a bad game. It was however very cash grabby, probably having the most microtransactions than any previous PvZ game. There's no doubt that this being a freemium mobile game was done to capitalize on the popularity of PvZ at the time for a quick buck. Just turns out there was still a decent game attached to it. After PvZ Heroes, a new game wouldn't come out until 2019. In these 3 years without a new game, Garden Warfare 2, PvZ 2, and PvZ Heroes continued to get updates, and in the summer of 2019, Garden Warfare 2 got the Tale of the Taco DLC update. It came with 7 weeks of limited time game modes, which were variations of game modes with some sort of unique twist to it. Every week there would also be community challenges, which is what it exactly sounds like. Challenges that the collective player base would contribute towards completing, which would give everybody rewards if the community reached certain milestones. Turns out that the Tale of the Taco DLC was a send-off of Garden Warfare 2 before it would start receiving support from PopCap because a brand new sequel to the series of third-person shooters would be releasing, Plants vs. Zombies Battle for Neighbourville. Scrapping the Garden Warfare name, Battle for Neighbourville was supposed to stand out from its predecessors, and oh man did it stand out, but not for good reason. It was extremely divisive, and if you look at the Steam charts for the game, it's not exactly looking too good. And Garden Warfare actually has more players than it. Of course, this does not include console players, but if the player base is this split between 2 games, then it means Battle for Neighbourville must have had some pretty big problems. But let's be fair and start by looking at what's new in Battle for Neighbourville like we did for Garden Warfare 2. First, the single player campaign is much higher in quality than the one in Garden Warfare 2, and you can tell there was a lot more focus and effort put into making the single player experience. The campaign actually has replayability, unlike Garden Warfare 2's campaign, and it also has some well-made full-on boss fights, making the PvE experience in Battle for Neighbourville a worthwhile portion of the game and not just some extra content on the side. However, the PvP experience has much to be desired. First of all, every single character variant is gone. Oh yeah, remember that genius system of having subclasses within the main classes, so effectively there were over 100 unique characters to play. Well, it's all gone now. Good job, PopCap! Imagine making a sequel where you just delete 80% of the character roster you had in the previous game, and instead, you basically make the Overwatch character selection screen. Every character is now grouped into either being attack, defend, or support class, which is just taking a 180-degree turn and then running 10 kilometers in the other direction. It's the exact opposite of what the variants did. You got more freedom and choice in choosing what playstyle you wanted, since you could play different hybrid classes with the variants. But in Battle for Neighbourville, you're locked into playing your specific role in an attempt to promote team-centric gameplay. Just from the removal of the character variants alone, many people found a game to be not as fun and interesting as Garden Warfare 2. Turns out if you take a main component of what made a game so great, it divides the fan base and people will find a game to be just a worse version of a better game they already had. Despite additions like brand new classes and the new legendary upgrades, they couldn't save Battle for Neighbourville, and neither could the single player campaign, even though it was a big improvement from Garden Warfare 2, and unfortunately, a year after the release of Battle for Neighbourville, the game was discontinued and would no longer receive content updates. It's honestly sad what happened to Battle for Neighbourville, since this is not at all a terrible game. It's evident there was a lot of love and effort put into the game. The visuals look nice, and the animations have a lot of charm and are very expressive. And the single player campaign, while still having some flaws, was still well made, and like I said, was a big step up from Garden Warfare 2's campaign. It's just that it was unnecessary to reinvent and innovate on the formula for a successful game PopCap already had on their hands, and removing variants was a deal breaker for too many players. So where does this leave the franchise at now? Well, Garden Warfare 2 and Battle for Neighbourville still have an active player base, but they both stopped getting any content updates since the team that develops the third-person shooters are no longer working on Plants vs. Zombies games. Or at least I think that's the case. I'm not entirely sure because trying to figure that out somehow takes you down a rabbit hole of which I'm not going to get into because I tried, and then had to delete 500 words from my script to prevent going on a massive tangent. All you need to know is that PopCap has multiple studios, and their division based in Vancouver, Canada, works on the third-person shooters, but probably due to the failure of Battle for Neighbourville, they've been moved to work on different projects. Even though Battle for Neighbourville was a bit of a commercial failure, PopCap still had their poster boys of the franchise, the tower defense games. So even though the PvZ series hit a bad spot with Battle for Neighbourville, fans still held on to hope for Plants vs. Zombies 3, which included me. And we didn't have to wait for long, as on February 25th, 2020, there was a soft launch of Plants vs. Zombies 3. And this doesn't look good. And I don't mean just visually, but oh man do these new 3D graphics look bad. This new installment of Plants vs. Zombies continues the trend of innovating just to innovate. There was no reason to move to 3D graphics, but it did anyways, and this is somehow more scarring than the 3D renditions of the plants from Garden Warfare. Obviously, graphics aren't everything, and it's subjective whether you like it. And transitions from 2D to 3D have been successful before for other series, just like Bloons Tower Defense 6 for example. But I mean, you gotta do it right, otherwise you're just shooting yourself in the foot. But let's not dwell on how the game looks, and instead look at how this game plays, which unfortunately is somehow worse. Ever heard of the hit game Clash Royale developed by Supercell? Well, introducing Clash Royale 2, now developed by PopCap, where the Sunflower has been morphed into the Elixir Bar, and the sight of microtransactions makes you want to shrivel up and die. Plants vs. Zombies 3 still retains the core gameplay from the first two games of planting vegetables to defeat the undead, but everything around it is different. I unfortunately never played the soft launch of PvZ 3 since I only found out about it after the beta closed. But from what I found through watching gameplay and a surprisingly well-made video from Danarade, can you believe this entire thing was edited with the free version of KindMaster? Plants vs. Zombies 3 was basically Candy Crush in the sense that progression is done through a system of progressively more difficult levels that eventually get so hard they force you into spending money on the game or wasting your soul away grinding. And it's like Clash Royale in the sense that they copied the entire UI layout and the card upgrade system. Here's the shop, here's your plants, here's the play menu, here's a club, and here's how you upgrade your plants. Notice any similarities? That's literally the exact same thing! Expectedly, fans of Plants vs. Zombies weren't exactly thrilled about PvZ 3 being some weird combination of already existing mobile games. Luckily, there is still a chance for redemption as PopCap actually listened to the community and went back to the drawing board. They would make the game unavailable for download to work on changes before re-releasing Plants vs. Zombies 3. This happened 4 separate times, with the most recent re-release happening in October of 2022, and it's the version of the game I'll be talking about. After the first soft launch, pretty much everything was changed. The art style is different, the gameplay is different, progression is different, everything is different. So did these changes ultimately turn Plants vs. Zombies 3 into a game deserving of the title of a true sequel to the Plants vs. Zombies franchise? Nope, and somehow it's arguably even worse. Remember how I said that in Battle for Neighbourville, they removed the variants, which was a big reason for the failure of the game? Well, it seems that PopCap didn't learn a single thing from that. While the general gameplay loop of a series of levels of lane-based tower defense is intact, PopCap proceeded to remove the entire ability to select your own goddamn plants. Instead, every single level consists of a pre-picked selection of plants. You get no indication of what zombies there are, and you're immediately thrown into the level. This completely changes the gameplay. You no longer plan your defenses around what zombies you know will show up by picking the right plants for the job, because both of them are just gone. And instead, gameplay is reliant on you reacting to what the game throws at you. This essentially takes away 90% of the strategy, variety in gameplay, and fun found in the first two tower defense games. And it makes Plants vs. Zombies 3 so incredibly fundamentally different for a game that is supposedly the successor to Plants vs. Zombies 1 and 2. Unfortunately, this is only where the problems begin. The level design in PvZ 3 is absolutely atrocious. Levels are lightning fast and incredibly simple, and many players feel like it's just 50 levels of a tutorial. The thing is, this is probably what the whole game is going to be like, which is really concerning. The game will be incredibly simple, and there's going to be no real strategy involved because the difficulty of a level will be solely determined by what the game gives you and what zombies will appear. This probably means that the game is leaning even more into being like those Match 3 mobile games, in which levels will get harder as it goes on to incentivize using the new power-ups, which leads to, you know what, microtransactions! And this isn't the only place where there are microtransactions. When you lose a level, you can either spend some coins to blow back the zombies away from your house, giving you more time, or you can give up and you lose a brain in order to retry. I wonder where that's from. And look, we're not even close to being finished dissecting this game, and there's still more to go through. There are the aforementioned brains, which is this game's life system that I absolutely despise. Life and energy systems in games are so stupid because they literally limit you from playing the game, so you either have to wait or, ooh, you could go and buy your microtransactions. Don't you want to not have to wait? Like, can you go away, please? Then there's these taco tickets that you get after beating a level, which lets you customize the hub world. I wonder where they got that idea from. Okay, I'm gonna stop. I think you get the picture of what this game is like. It's riddled with pretty much every textbook mobile game monetization method, and the game itself is not fun because of terrible level design and the removal of being able to select your own plants, which is what gave the Plants vs. Zombies games its replayable and varied gameplay in the first place. And as much as I want to go on talking about everything in PvZ 3, I think it's better to ask one very important question. What is this game? You know why I asked that? No matter what you tell me, this is not Plants vs. Zombies 3. It's just an amalgamation of Candy Crush, Homescapes, and the thousands of other crap mobile games, but it just so happens to still have the gameplay of Plants vs. Zombies. But this is not the Plants vs. Zombies that I know. It's clear that Plants vs. Zombies 3 is supposed to be another one of those hyper-casual puzzle games, and if you look at it that way, you really easily see why PvZ 3 is the way that it is. PopCap isn't making changes like removing the ability to choose your own plants, or making levels really short and simple because they're bad at game design. They're just not making another game that the fans know and love to be part of the beloved Plants vs. Zombies series. Instead, they're trying to appeal to the masses of the continuously growing mobile game market, a place where companies can make a lot of money. And that's unfortunately where we leave off at. After 14 long years, the Plants vs. Zombies franchise has seen 3 tower defense games, 3 third-person shooters, a card game, a Facebook game, and a surprisingly large assortment of obscure Chinese games that I didn't talk about. So where will the series go from here? Regarding Plants vs. Zombies 3, I think that PopCap might just be dead set on developing it as a hyper-casual puzzle game, especially since they haven't made any major changes for 3 re-releases now. Whether the game will be successful is yet to be seen, but if they don't make any major changes like adding back the ability to choose your own plants, they'll be at least alienating the majority of PvZ fans. And if they keep going further down the mobile game route, then the Plants vs. Zombies franchise might as well be considered dead to me. I mean, I haven't really been hiding my disdain for microtransactions in mobile games, so if PopCap keeps up with this, I probably won't be too happy. However, the Plants vs. Zombies series will only truly die once PopCap themselves actually go bankrupt and have to shut down. And since mobile games are usually very profitable, it means that PvZ 3 might just keep the franchise alive, and I'll still hold out hope that in the future, PopCap will return Plants vs. Zombies back to the beloved series that I once knew. While it's unfortunate that the Plants vs. Zombies franchise isn't in the greatest state right now, it's still left an impactful legacy, and I just want to say thank you to the original Plants vs. Zombies team of George Fenn, Laura Shigihara, Rich Werner, and Todd Semple for making such an incredible game. Also, even though PopCap might not be giving Plants vs. Zombies much love right now, the community still constantly does amazing stuff like creating massive mods that rework the entirety of Plants vs. Zombies 2, or full-on fan games of their own. Speaking of the community, I've noticed that a lot of YouTubers and videos about Plants vs. Zombies with the modern day Final Wave music from PvZ2, which is actually a remix of Zombies on Your Lawn, which is the credits song for the first game.
Hey Games Foundation, it's me, Editor Games Foundation. I found an awesome remix of the song you're talking about. You should sing it for an outro.
No, I'm not doing that. Everybody uses it and I want to be original. But I mean, it is a really good song.
Too late, I already started the song.
What? Why did you do that? Okay, fine. I guess ending off this video with the same song that ended off one of my favorite games of all time is fitting. But before I go, it would be appreciated if you subscribed. You'll probably not get another video for like 2 months, but you should do it anyways. And now here I go. There's a zombie on your lawn. There's a zombie on your lawn. There's a zombie on your lawn. We don't want zombies on the lawn. I know your type, tall, dark and dead. You wanna bite all the petals off of my head and then eat the brains of the one who planted me here. No! I'm just a sunflower, but see me proud and tired infantry. You like the taste of brains, we don't like zombies.
I used to play football.
Football
Road goes protect my head.
on his head.
All I was green door shield.
Green door shield.
We are the undead.
There's a zombie on your lawn. There's a zombie on your lawn. There's a zombie on your lawn. We don't want zombies on the lawn. Maybe it's time to reevaluate. I know you have a lot of food on your plate. Brains are quite rich in cholesterol. You're dead, so it doesn't matter. Instead, we'll use the solar power to make a lawn defense at any hour.
I like a tricycle.
Tricycle.
There's butter on my head.
Butter on his head.
I'm gonna eat your brains.
No, 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 no.
We are the undead.
There's a zombie on your lawn. There's a zombie on your lawn. There's a zombie on your lawn. We don't want zombies on the lawn.